How does a company go from owning 80% of a billion-dollar market to being the poster child for the greatest economic suicide in tech history? In 1982, Atari was the fastest-growing company in American history. They weren't just making games, they were printing money. To the outside world, the party looked like it would never end. Houses, cars, and private jets were all bought on the back of a simple wooden-paneled box called the VCS. But beneath the surface, a toxic cocktail of arrogance and greed was being stirred. Atari believed they were invincible. They thought that no matter what garbage they put inside a plastic cartridge, the public would blindly swallow it. Little did they know, they were standing on a landmine that was about to vaporize an entire industry. This is not just a story about a failed toy. It is the story of how the pioneers of the digital age almost killed the future of entertainment before it even truly began.
To understand the fall, we have to understand the birth. 1972. Nolan Bushnell, a visionary who preferred beer and beanbags to boardrooms, launches Atari with just $500. Their first hit? Pong. It was simple, it was intuitive, and it was addictive. Bushnell's philosophy was easy to learn, difficult to master. Under his leadership, Atari was a playground. Engineers worked in flip-flops, and the culture was fueled by innovation and a touch of anarchy. By 1977, they released the Atari 2600, bringing the arcade experience into the living room for the first time. It was a revolution. But in order to scale, Bushnell sold the company to Warner Communications for $28 million. It was a deal with the devil. The suits arrived, the wild engineers were sidelined, and the soul of the company began to rot from the top down. The focus shifted from make it great to make it fast.
For years, Atari controlled every single game that was played on their system. But in 1979, 4 of Atari's top programmers walked out of the office in protest of being treated like invisible laborers. They formed Activision, the world's first third-party developer. Atari sued, and they lost. This legal defeat changed everything. Suddenly, every company from dog food manufacturers to cereal brands realized they could make a cheap game and sell it for $40. The market was flooded with shelf filler. Shops were overwhelmed with hundreds of titles that were, quite frankly, unplayable. There was no quality control, no reviews, no internet to warn you. Parents would buy a game, take it home, and find out it was a buggy mess. Trust was the currency of the industry, and Atari was spending it faster than they could earn it. Eventually, the consumer reached a breaking point. If every game is bad, why buy any games at all?
Then came E.T., the extraterrestrial. Steven Spielberg's movie was a global phenomenon, and Atari CEO, Ray Kassar, paid a staggering $21 million just for the rights. There was only one problem. The deal was signed in late July, and the game had to be on shelves by Christmas. A typical game took 6 months to a year to develop. Atari gave their lead programmer, Howard Scott Warshaw, exactly 5 weeks. It was a suicide mission. Warshaw worked around the clock, fueled by adrenaline and sheer will. He actually finished it, but the result was a confusing, frustrating mess where the character spent most of the time falling into holes. Atari, in their infinite wisdom, manufactured 4 million copies, expecting it to be the best-selling game of all time. They even produced more cartridges than there were consoles in existence, assuming it would drive hardware sales. It didn't. Most of those 4 million copies were sent right back to the warehouse. While E.T. is often blamed, the real wound was Pac-Man. At the time, Pac-Man was the biggest name in gaming. People were lined up around the block at arcades. When Atari announced the home version, it should have been the ultimate victory. Instead, it was a disaster. To save money on memory chips, Atari's engineers had to butcher the graphics. The iconic yellow Ghost Chaser flickered, changed colors, and looked nothing like the arcade original. The sound was a harsh, grating clunk instead of the melodic waka waka. Atari produced 12 million cartridges, but they only sold 7 million. Even the people who bought it were furious. 12 million copies of a bad game meant 12 million unhappy customers. Retailers, already struggling with an oversupply of junk games, began to panic. They started slashing prices from $40 down to $5 just to clear the shelves. The value of a video game in the eyes of the public was plummeting towards zero. By 1983, the bubble didn't just burst, it evaporated. Revenues for the industry dropped by a staggering 97% in just 2 years. Atari was hemorrhaging millions of dollars every single day. Their warehouses were overflowing with millions of unsold E.T. and Pac-Man cartridges that nobody wanted.
They couldn't sell them, and they couldn't store them. So, in the dead of night, Atari sent 14 truckloads of unsold inventory to a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico. They crushed the cartridges with steamrollers, poured concrete over them, and buried the evidence of their failure in the desert sand. For decades, this was considered an urban legend, a myth of corporate shame. But in 2014, an excavation proved it was all true. Thousands of crushed ET cartridges were pulled from the earth, a literal time capsule of the moment the industry died. Atari, once the king of tech, was sold off in pieces. The dream was over.
The Great Video Game Crash of 1983 was so severe that most experts thought video games were a fad that had simply run its course. Like the hula hoop or the pet rock, they believed gaming was dead. For 2 years, the American market stayed in a coma. But across the ocean, a small Japanese playing card company called Nintendo was watching. They learned from Atari's mistakes. When they brought the NES to America in 1985, they didn't even call it a video game system. They called it an entertainment system. They included a robot toy. They implemented a physical seal of quality to tell consumers that the game wouldn't be a broken mess. Nintendo rebuilt the trust that Atari had shattered. They proved that software, not marketing, was the heart of the business. While Atari never regained its former glory, its spectacular failure provided the blueprint for everything that followed.
So, what is the lesson of the Atari story? It is a warning that remains relevant today, from the world of streaming to the world of crypto. Success is a terrible teacher. It makes you think you can't fail, and it makes you forget the people who made you successful in the first place. Atari forgot that their customers were intelligent, and they forgot that their creators were artists. They chose short-term quarterly profits over long-term brand health, and they paid the ultimate price. Today, gaming is a $300 billion industry, larger than movies and music combined. But we must remember, it almost didn't happen. Every time you play a polished, high-budget masterpiece, you are standing on the ruins of a company that tried to sell the world a broken dream. The crash of '83 wasn't just an end. It was a brutal, necessary evolution. Even the mightiest giants can fall if they forget to value the very thing they created. I hope this deep dive gave you a new perspective on the strategies and the relentless mindset behind these global icons. If you enjoy deconstructing business empires and tech legends in this Tech Archive style, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. That way, you will never miss a new blueprint of history. For those of you ready to explore more boardroom coups and technological breakthroughs, I have handpicked 2 videos for you right here on the screen. Click one to keep watching. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.